Trump is back. So I decided I will no longer be doing this show from America. I'm out of here. I'm leaving the country. Goodbye. Goodbye. I'm done. All right, obviously I'm just playing around, but some people are not. And more specifically, some black people are not playing about leaving the US behind for a better life somewhere else on the globe. Some are vowing to get the heck out now that Trump is coming back for another term. Although I'm sure most of them, just like me, are not going anywhere. There's always that group of people that vows to leave if the person they despise wins the presidential election. But you see them making the same claims at the next election. Guys, we know by now you're probably not going anywhere. But this video is about those who have actually pulled the plug and either moved permanently out of the US or have relocated temporarily and love their experience. We've done a video before that focused on top countries black expats are moving to. You know, you can find it up here if you haven't watched it yet, or find it in the description. That video focused on the countries black Americans are moving to and what those countries have to offer. In this video, I'm doing it a little bit differently. My focus will be on the reasons why Americans, and more specifically black Americans, are leaving the US behind. I'll also be discussing where they are moving to and what their experience there has been. And I'll be getting these specific stories from various articles published on this topic. If you've ever lived abroad or you have an experience living outside of the US, because maybe you're an immigrant, I'd love to read about your experience and opinion. Leave those comments, of course I'll be reading them. First up is why young black people are relocating abroad, and for that, let's take a look at an article on Mic.com titled, "Why Young People of Color Are Getting the Hell Out of the US." The article focuses on two main reasons why young black people are choosing to live outside of the US. The first is the political climate that many millennials and Gen Z believe has become toxic and increasingly hostile to progressive ideas in recent years. And since this is the generation that has come of age with social media and endless travel content, the idea of living abroad is not a foreign one. The second reason for why some young Americans are fleeing the US is how difficult it has become to keep up financially with just life. I mean, I don't care what they say about inflation. The cost of things are so freaking expensive. And if any emergency comes up, it's like minimum now is $1,000. It doesn't make any sense at all. Since working remotely has become such a routine part of work culture, more and more people are taking advantage of that and deciding to live somewhere cheaper while still making the same or similar type of income they had in the US. One story from the Mic.com's article is of a 25-year-old teacher and influencer that chose to reside in Mexico. She found living in Mexico gives her a much better work-life balance and is more affordable than the US. She also stated she feels more at ease in Mexico as a black woman. Mexico repeatedly shows up as a preferred place for black Americans to relocate to, and the reasons are pretty simple. Close proximity to the US, which means ease of travel to see family and friends, cheaper cost of living, and a rich culture that a lot of Americans are already familiar with. One interviewee for the article made a point to mention that blackness is still not highly regarded in Latin America, meaning black people still face racism there. But I guess any place you go probably has racism, so you might as well go somewhere you could afford to live, right? I mean, at this point, I might deal with a little racism to afford a house. At least that's what I think is the thought process here. Moving on to an article posted on parents.com, black parents are moving out of the US for various reasons, but the main theme that binds them all is the rejection of a way of life in the US. Life in America can be hectic. God, can it be hectic. One black mother said her mental health improves when she travels, so she decided to extensively travel with her daughter, and they eventually settled in Lisbon, Portugal, another favorite place for black Americans. If anybody wants to go to Lisbon, Portugal, I've been dying to go to this place. Please follow me on Directed by Jarrett on Instagram. I would love to go check out this place, and we might never come back. Another family featured in the article also moved to Lisbon and has been experiencing a slower pace of life that has them more engaged in their community. Other places black families have relocated to include Spain and France. The theme of peace of mind runs through all the stories of black parents moving out of the US, whether that be due to lower crime rates in other countries or their slower pace of life that prioritizes family time over hustle culture. Now let's look at some of the stories of some black women specifically that chose to move abroad, as told in the article, "These black women moved to Europe for a better life, did they find it? This article on refinery29.com is actually written by a black woman who also lives abroad. And guess where? Portugal strikes again. Writer Margot Gabriel wrote that moving to Portugal gave her the opportunity to be more creative and freed her from crippling anxiety. All the women she interviews for the article relocated to Portugal in search of a better quality of life, and it seems like they found it. The writer did dedicate a big portion of the article to discuss the complexities of fleeing racism in the US to move to a country like Portugal with a massive history of colonization. But to me, it's safe to say if you're trying to flee the US in search of a perfect country that has a clean past or even a clean present, it's gonna be an impossible task. And I mean, that just has to be stated. Another important point mentioned by several interviewees is that there is a lot of bureaucracy to obtain residency in Portugal. So the point of it being that moving outside of the US and actually settling somewhere might not be as easy as some might think. And lastly, we have stories of black Americans that moved to various countries in Africa, as told in the article, Racism Driving Some Black Families to Leave the United States, posted on the Griot. Does anyone remember Ghana's The Year of the Return, a campaign to encourage black Americans to visit or even relocate to Ghana to reconnect with their roots? That campaign has been somewhat successful as more and more black Americans are opening up to the idea of moving to Ghana and even other countries in Africa. One family in the article even moved to Uganda and another one moved to South Africa. They all mentioned the comfort of living in societies where their blackness no longer makes them feel like a minority. One mother even mentioned that her daughter no longer gets bullied due to her dark complexion. There was one black therapist that relocated to Ghana that cautioned against moving to Africa to escape racism. She said moving to Africa comes with its own set of challenges, like being othered, because now you become a foreigner. She advised seeking therapy first to deal with the trauma of racism. And I think that's a good note to end on this video, especially with Trump becoming president. Get a good therapist because you're probably gonna need it. The appeal of moving out of the US to escape racism, violence, hectic lifestyle, financial difficulties is absolutely all there. But is the grass always greener on the other side? From these stories I have read, most of them seem happy with their move. But I've also watched several videos on expats complaining about the lack of access to certain things they were used to in the US, or the bureaucracy. It's all difficult to say. Me personally, I just got back to Japan, and honestly, you do feel completely different when you step outside of the US. I personally don't think I could ever live there permanently, but I see exactly what other people are talking about. Anyway, as always, leave your comments below if you've moved abroad or traveled abroad and you absolutely love it. Let other people know so that maybe we can go experience the same thing you experienced. Don't forget to like and subscribe.